Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Surf to the Horizon, a place where we experience and enjoy the difficult waves in a teenager's life to thrive. On this episode, I have with me Arika Singh, who is an award winning menstrual and sexual health educator and an entrepreneur. She's the founder and president of Tarini Foundation, who advocates for sexual well-being and education. Personally, I came across your page through my sister, and since then, I'm really fascinated by the work that you're doing because I think it's very relevant in today's world. So, it's an honor to have you with us, Artika.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I apologize for having a really bad throat, but I'll try my best to do this. And thanks once again for inviting me. I'm excited to talk about this.
Thank you. So, before everything, I want to know about how you came into entrepreneurship and where did the idea of Tarini Foundation stem from?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, just nuance that I am in entrepreneurship, except I'm in social entrepreneurship right now, at least. So, Tarini, for example, is not a for-profit company; it's a non-profit company, non-profit organization, and we do work on a sustainable finance model where we try to finance our non-profit projects using certain for-profit activities. So, for example, something like social media marketing, doing workshops in public places which are paid, so on and so forth. In terms of how I came across the idea, I think a lot of people might know this already, but I was working on a project in mental and sexual health when I was in second year of college, and the project was for a CSR for a company. And I was also studying public health at the time, and that's why I was doing that project, and just felt very, very connected to it because I have also like had bad experiences in terms of my own reproductive menstrual health, not finding access to information, doctors, all those kinds of things. So when I started working on it, it was just like an immediate connect, and it was really just like at that time I was unsure how I wanted to proceed with it, and then as college moved ahead, and by the time I was done, it was like okay, this is an avenue I can explore. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think after that it was like a snowball effect. It was okay, what next, and I think we're still rolling. So
No, I agree. I think it's a great initiative. So before diving into other people's experiences that we kind of gathered on Instagram, why don't you tell me about your journey and how was it like when you got your first period? Did you know what periods are, and were your parents supportive? So generally, like just the atmosphere at home and in school.
yeah, firstly, it feels like a lifetime ago. So it's like a little fun also actually to talk about this because I don't think I've thought about it for so many years. In terms of like just going backward, were my parents supportive? Yes. I went to a residential school when I was 10 years old. So before I left, I remember both my parents sitting me down and talking to me about it and just being like, don't be scared of it. And this is something that happens. It's a normal process and it might hurt, and just kind of like really I wouldn't say it normalized it for me, but like I had heard about it and they had tried to normalize it for me, for sure. And then, of course, I got it a few years after that. So I knew what it was because they told me. And I remember they'd shown me what a pad looked like and showed me how to use it and everything before I left the school when I was 10. And then, I'd forgotten about it because I didn't get to kind of use it or anything, or it just was like when something's not functional, you forget about it. And I remember then I got my first period on New Year's Eve. I think it was 13. Yeah, 13. And so I knew about it and everything. And I remember the underwear color that I was wearing. I was wearing an orange underwear and I matched it with my orange skirt. And it was just really funny because I remember being so terrified, even though I knew what it was. So I knew what it was and why it was. But I don't know, I think my child brain had decided that this was never going to happen to me. Like this was just some abstract information my parents had given to me that don't talk to strangers, don't eat food that strangers give you, and also you're going to get your period. So I thought none of those things were ever going to happen to me, and the other two didn't. So it was, I was definitely terrifying, and it was really just like all the information was out of my head, and I was like crying in the bathroom. I remember, And then I called my dad, and like he was like, "Okay, stop crying." And then I remember he went out and got me pads, and all of that happened. I was not at home. I was on a New Year's Eve trip. And then, it was really like, oh my God, like, will my cousins know? And it was very like a strange feeling. I can't even relate with the feeling anymore because now it's like I have such a different point of view about it, and so do people around me, including family and friends. So yeah, I think I was definitely very lucky in the way that I had that support. But then when I went back to school and I met more people, and now especially through work, I realized that I'm one of the exceptions who has that support. And it has, of course, it has something to do with education and information. But a lot of times, the people who are educated and informed as well may not extend that support. So that is always at the back of my mind a really big thing and a big reason for why we do what we do. So, almost to an extent where sometimes people are like, why are you being so in your face, right? Like you could have avoided mentioning the word pad, and you could have avoided mentioning that XYZ had your period. So I was like, yeah, but we have avoided it for many years. So like I think it's that like time to start mentioning it now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm in fact that was like my next question, that when the atmosphere at home is so supportive, did you find it like weird when people around you were still considering it as a taboo, right? So was it like weird to you, for the lack of a better word, or was it strange to you that yeah, you are still an exception in society, and that periods is not something that people talk about on a daily basis, or it's considered not normal?
So actually, the opposite. So I thought I was having a weird experience, and I thought like, why? Like I thought I'm the weird one because everybody else was one way, and then I was doing my own kind of thing. And so my father's a doctor, so I think like growing up, I thought, oh, like I think it's like this in my family because he's a doctor, and I think he approaches it from like a medical sort of point of view. And then, like as I kept growing up, I kept realizing there were several layers to it, like the fact that I have a very close knit family, the fact that my parents are certain type of people, and so on and so forth. But yeah, like I think the only weird thing in my head was that I was having weird experiences, not everybody else. I thought like my like parents were being strange and like were forcing me to talk about all this.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Like if I talk about my experience, I when I got it, I knew about it, and I was supposed to go back to school on that Sunday, like to boarding, and it was very painful. And so my mom was like, "I think you should skip school for a day or two." And so she wrote a mail that she's going to be absent, and she said she's on her period. So I think from that day, I kind of realized that it's not something to be like awkward about it, and you can just. So I was lucky in that sense, where my mom was like, you should just own up to it. So, like coming back to the question, you obviously think, right, that parents should have these conversations at home, like both your father and your mother. Like in your case, obviously your dad is a doctor, so it was conditioned that he will talk to you. But like normally, I think it's important for both the parents to kind of talk about this, right?
Absolutely. I mean, also just to that point, I always thought that my dad had that conversation with me because he was a doctor. But I now know lots of doctors, parents who don't have that conversation. So I think that was like a rationalization process that my brain as a kid went through. And I think it has so much more to do with that the fact that he is just a very protective father and that my mother is a very protective mother, and they just wanted to be the ones to tell me about these things. And then as life went on, they were also the ones to tell me about a lot of other things that I didn't know about. So I think like more than the profession and all that, like I don't think those can be the barriers in such information going through to people. And I would also not singularize it and be like mother, father. I think anybody who's a guardian to anybody and knows more about a topic, whatever it is, including menstruation, should be kind of taking it on as a responsibility almost and telling them because why not? Of course. If you've had some experiences and you have a younger sibling or you have somebody else who will be going through same experiences, it would be actually just a really nice process to share your experiences at least. I don't expect everybody to be like educator level and have all the details and have all the scientific facts in place. Because a lot of times people, when they're scared and when they're anxious about things like first period, they couldn't care lesser about scientific facts. They want some comfort, which can come from anybody else who's gone through that experience, because they know that it's not the end of the world. They know it's going to be fine. They know that there will be a time when it becomes normalized in their lives. So, yeah, definitely all parents, all guardians, anybody in that capacity to future menstruator can and has the space to have that conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also, I from your Instagram, I kind of came across the fact that you don't say like girls menstruate, right? You the term is like menstruator, right? So can you like probably educate us more about the whole pronouns and why you call menstruators and not like girls menstruating?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like for anybody who's like listening, in like just all honesty, of course, when I worked in college, which was 2016, we did say women, we did say women's health, we said girls, we said all day, we said all of the words that you just mentioned we don't use now when we talk in the context of menstruation. And the reason that I'm saying this is because it's important to know that it's fine if you're in a place where you say this now, and there is a reason behind why we don't say it right now. And just the reason is that, like, as you go with time, you keep educating yourself, including us as educators. It's our responsibility to also keep updating our information, right? And the reason why we don't use them anymore is because women, girl, all of these are gender identities, and gender being different from sex assigned at birth. So the difference, just to kind of briefly describe it, the sex assigned at birth is a combination of anatomy, which is physical body parts, of hormones, of even chromosomal makeup. And currently, there are three that are identified as sexes assigned at birth, of which one is assigned female at birth. Um, and when I say assigned female at birth, again, all of these things that I mentioned. So, have a uterus, most likely will have a uterus, most likely will have a vagina, vulva, most likely will, so on and so forth. And then gender is a entirely different concept, which is a social concept now recognized. And when I say now, it's actually been around since the 1970s. The UN has talked about it, in terms of connecting it with race being a social concept as well. But, has now really come into the foreground with the help of social media, with the help of popular public discourse, which is a good thing. And so gender is beyond the physical. If your physical and your sex can be interrelated with the gender as well, but it's to say that these two are separate entities. They may interlink for some people, they may not interlink for some people, they may partially interlink for some people, and so on and so forth. So now, because menstruation is a physical phenomena, it's a health, medical, I usually don't call it medical, but just because it's related to a body part, a lot of times people want to say medical, but it's actually not a disorder. It's part of normal physiology. But yeah, so because menstruation is a physical concept, it's obvious almost, and it's like the right thing to do to connect it to the sex assigned at birth, which is a biological concept, rather than connect it with gender, which is a social concept. So that's the long short of it. And this is to say that even if somebody doesn't identify with the gender woman, or with the gender girl, but still has a uterus and still has a vagina vulva complex and the ovaries and does menstruate, why should they get left behind from public discourse? Why should they get left behind from when medicines are being designed, or things like menstrual leaves are being talked about, or just any conversation on menstruation, or when there's data being collected for menstruators' benefits? So, and also, like, menstruators is still not officially a word, and we've actually done a video about that as well, about how samosa is a word, but menstruators isn't. But menstruators is still not a word, officially accepted word, but like, I know we use it. I know a lot of other people who use it, and so in that sense, it's a more inclusive term to use. I think another way to say it is um, folks who menstruate. Another way to say it is women and any other gender that menstruates, and so on and so forth. But menstruators is just like kind of putting them all together and like just acknowledging that menstruation actually doesn't have a gender. It is linked to certain body parts existing. and certain physiological processes existing, but it doesn't really have a gender.
Yeah, that's interesting piece of information that I kind of didn't know. So I think moving on, we gathered a couple of responses from my podcast page and from Tarini Foundation's page. So I think we'll just talk about these experiences a little bit and kind of touch upon these topics. So one of the person said that with periods, I got acne, which was another deal that I had to accept since it was different for me. Therefore, accepting it became a challenge. It even stemmed on becoming my insecurity. So, like, what do you have to say about different things that also come in with periods, right? I think with periods, you do kind of get a lot of insecurities also, right?
Absolutely, and I think my generation has had it the worst because, when we first got our periods, we had all this, all these issues. It's not just period, it's also that you hit puberty, right? Like that's why you're getting your period. And then a lot of these things are not related to the period, they're related to puberty. They will happen even if you're not having your period. But yes, like a lot of people, like I have acne flare ups when I'm around my period, and, I'll bloat up and things like that. And why I'm saying our generation had it the worst was because when we started our period, we used to hate it and we just didn't know how to deal with it. And then, we would be like tripping about it. And if we, for example, had to go out and meet people, we'd be like, we have acne, we can't go out. Like really strange things like that also we've done. Or if you've bloated up, we'd be like, we can't wear this because we're bloated up, or we shouldn't eat this because we're bloated up. So just like struggle. And then like we reached that somewhere in between spot in our like late teens where we became like that like slightly woke generation where we were like acne is okay, everything's okay, live your life, blah blah blah. And like some people were adapting to it well and some people were not. And then if you didn't adapt to the wokeness of like being okay with having acne, you were again singled out because then you were like, oh, but you're so superficial, you give a shit about acne. And then now we've come into the space where we're like, personal individual choices are okay. So if you have an issue with your acne and it is an insecurity for you, that's completely valid. Like we hear you, we understand that. And let's see if there's something we can do to help you with that or something you can do for yourself to fix that. But if you're also someone who's like, I don't give a shit, that's amazing as well. So I think we've gone through all those phases and like reached here and like let's see how we adult. I'm not sure. But yeah, for sure. And like PMS, whenever we talk about PMS symptoms is one thing, right? Like acne, even body care, cramps, all of these are one things. But I think I do want to talk about things like um, uh, dysphoria that goes around periods, right? That for some people, PMS symptoms are just symptoms, which are like, okay, you can take a crocin, you can take a metal, just like naming medicines, by the way, please don't take medicines that are named, but just, these name brands that everybody knows if they've menstruated and you can do these things, use a hot water bottle. For a lot of people, it's a lot worse. And for a lot of people, it's worse to the extent that it starts interfering with their mental health and it starts affecting their lives in a lot more major ways than it would for some other menstruators. And why I mention this is because, again, the whole generation waves that happen towards a particular concept that happened with menstruation as well. Like when we were just kids and we had just started off our periods, cramps were like, okay, you should rest. Like you just narrated your story. Your mom thought like you should rest it out. And then the in between phase, we really just wanted to be badass and be like, we can do everything while we're on our period. And now again, we're like, okay, like let's reevaluate. Can we really do this, or should we be just sitting back? And the thing is, all of those choices are okay, and we know that now. But externally, when there are non-menstruators in the mix, or even some other menstruators who talk to people who don't have the same period experiences as them, there can be a lot of gap in understanding. Like your cramp could be something you can handle and maybe go to office with, but another person's cramp could be something that they need injections for, or just something that they can't even get out of bed with. So I think there's like one very important part of talking about it and talking about it repeatedly and often, and about talking about individualized experiences, even if they are lesser in terms of statistics, is to say that everybody's experience is valid. Don't compare your experiences with other people to be better or worse. And your experience is your experience, and it's valid just because it's your experience, not because everyone has experienced it, not because there is a journal article about it. It's literally just valid because you're experiencing it. And you know what? Your treatment or your action plan should be based on whatever you're experiencing.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So another person said that she didn't know what periods are, and then further not getting more information about it because of the stigma attached to it. And then like her experience also was like, I think there was a guy in her class that kind of made fun of the fact that she had stains on her skirt. So I think that also comes from a place of like lack of awareness to it and lack of education to it, right?
For sure. I mean, I went to a quote unquote girls' school. So I think most of us actually also got our period around the same age, same class. And we used to live inside. And like, of course, there were so many more people in the school that also got their period. But let me assure you, it's not like education information was that much more in our school as one would imagine. It wasn't. It really wasn't. Like, I don't think we were even separately taken aside and talked to about this. It was kind of like, oh, and these people must be knowing because they should be knowing, kind of a thing. But, we definitely had it slightly easier. I've always imagined it to be slightly easier as compared to groups that have non-menstruators and menstruators in the class. Because yeah, I remember we would like, especially when we all had collectively started getting our period around the same age, somebody or the other would stay in. We used to have salwar kameezes in the summer, so that was easier because at least the kameez would like just hide our salwars if we were staying, and we could walk across the campus and go change and stuff. Um, so I think, yeah, everybody kind of was more understanding, but I still do remember it being slightly embarrassing. We used to play sports, so our sports teachers and coaches who were non-menstruators, they would be like a little kitsch because they thought we were just making shit up. Also because some people did make shit up to just like get out of PT and sports very fairly, but they basically thought we were always making shit up. If we said we were on our period or that we had stained ourselves, like they almost didn't understand the concept of staining. So if we were already on the field and then we stained ourselves, and we'd be like, we've stained ourselves, they'd be like, no, you haven't, you have to stay. And we would get into like these huge arguments and it would become an issue. Then it would settle down and then it would happen to someone else all over again, like the next week or something. So I do get that, and it's embarrassing, and 100%. Like I think in our school, where majority of the people were menstruators, the responsibility should have been taken up by the faculty to train each and every person who came in contact with any student, and inbuilt with empathy and information that it is a difficult time for some people, and they are kids and they are dealing for it, for the first like few years of their lives for the first time, and they may not be able to play sports. That's normal. They're not like doing things to get out of it. If they're being lazy, that is also part of being on your period. You feel lazy sometimes, like that's okay. But yeah, and definitely that's where information and education comes in. And whenever I talk to teachers now or even parents who reach out to us, I say like, this is not something you want to do for your kids who are going to be menstruating. This is something you should be doing for all your kids, because tomorrow, if there is a menstruator in any group, class, whatever, for your kid who's maybe not a menstruator, they should know what it is. Like, they shouldn't be treating this, because that menstruator is probably going through a lot being publicly stained as well. It gets easier with time, but some people may not find it easier at all, and that's fine. But it shouldn't be their responsibility. Like, it's not okay to be shamed for something that everybody goes through.
No, I agree. So, this is like the last experience that I got, which is not related to period, but I think it was important to touch upon this topic. So this girl, she got harassed by her tuition teacher, and the thing was that she didn't have any knowledge about basic consent and awareness of good touch and bad touch. So I think she didn't know how to go about it because of just the lack of kind of talk about this topic.
Yeah, firstly, I'm extremely sorry to hear about that experience, and 100% relevant to share, because like now I can share some information about it, which maybe can help someone. So yeah, I think good touch, bad touch concepts have become very, very popular, and they are teaching them to kids proactively now. I don't remember being taught that as a kid at all. Like maybe at home, not in so many words, but definitely not at an institutional level. And I should have been, but I wasn't. And I personally, and I have worked with, kids between the ages 8 and 12 about like 900 kids in that age group. And every time we pitched a project to their schools or to their teachers, they're like, oh, हाँ हमने उन्हें good touch bad touch सिखा दिया है. And yeah, we've done it. So like that's their way to say we don't need you. And then we have to kind of sit and ask them that like, what did you teach them? And then when they tell us, we're like, okay, we still want to do it again because we don't think you covered it. And that's fine because it's fine. You're a math teacher, you're an English teacher, and you're really good at your job. And you have not been given external training to talk about this, even though like that should somehow be a part of the system. But that's like, okay, that's why we're taking up this labor and this job. And the thing is, one thing we keep reiterating is that good touch, bad touch, the terms is a really like effective way to teach it because they're catchy and they're like quick and they're out there. But really, the conversation really needs to go beyond the concepts that it's at right now. Because right now, the good touch, bad touch concept, if anybody knows it or doesn't know it, that's fine. Is basically that there are certain areas of your body which, when touched, is equal to bad touch by certain people. And sometimes those certain people are like strangers. Sometimes those certain people are like anybody except yourself. Sometimes those the definition keeps changing, and it's like imagine an 8-year old trying to understand this, right? Or like a 10-year-old even trying to understand this. And it's very sad, but a lot of people in our generation learned it by experience. Like something happened to them and then they were like, that didn't feel good. And then they told somebody and that somebody was like, that was wrong. And then it was like, oh, note for the future. And then a slightly different similar experience would happen and be like, oh, that also didn't feel good. And that, then you go through the whole process again because we weren't ever systematically even asked to think about it. So that's why the conversation needs to go beyond certain parts, certain people, framework. Because very honestly, if somebody touches me here on my hand and I didn't want them to touch me, that's that touch to me. And it doesn't have to be sexual. It doesn't mean I should have felt something sexual out of it. I don't know how the other person's feeling anyway. But for it to be bad doesn't mean I should have felt something sexual out of me. It doesn't have to be on my butt. It doesn't have to be on my crotch. It doesn't have to be on my breasts. It could be anywhere. It could be my head, and I could feel not okay about it because it's really about like your body being your safe space in the world. And that's why you get to decide what is good and bad for you, and hence going beyond. And then again, in the same situation, I might be okay with somebody touching me on my breast and I may be consenting to it fully, and they may be a stranger even, but I'm consenting to it like there's an active exchange. So in that case it might just be good touch, right? Like, or like, let's not call it good touch, but at least it's not bad touch because I don't feel violated. So I think like the conversation is really about, and see, again, imagine teaching an 8 to 10-year-old this. It's not going to be very clear to them. For you and me at our age, we can understand this. Which is why my problem is with the fixed structure and this like very strict framework. So my understanding is to open up the framework, A, and B, instead of focusing so categorically on being like, ye good touch hai and ye bad touch hai, and iske alawa jo hota hai, wo good hai, bad hai. Instead of that, actually instilling certain values in people about consent in general, about bodily autonomy in general, about having choice, proactive choice in general. So, like if you tell someone that you are the only person who can give permission for things related to your body, that includes everything, like everything, like then it doesn't have to be broken down into parts. Like, so you instill those values rather than being like, ये 5 चीजें हैं good touch है, ये 5 चीजें bad touch है, मम्मी ने किया तो ठीक है, XYZ ने किया तो गलत है, that kind of a thing. And like when you instill those values, it's like you keep building on them over time. So like as an 8-year-old, you start off with something simpler. Then, maybe you can start off with the concept of private parts kya hote hain and all that. But the conversation goes beyond that. Like the concept of good touch, bad touch for a 20-year-old cannot be the same as what we're teaching kids at 8 years of age, right? Like it has to be built upon. And so that's why I always say that, yes, if you want to provide a list to younger kids, sure, let's go ahead and provide them a list just to simplify it for them. But the core part of it is to instill that value that they know that their body is their choice and it's their personal and private space that nobody else can violate unless they have actively consented to it.
Correct. No, yeah, I mean, I got this assembly when I was in fourth grade, and I think one assembly was definitely not enough. So I think I hear you when you say that. But thank you so much for taking out the time today, and I had a lovely conversation with you. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to talking to you again. And yeah, thank you so much. I think that's all.